This is a little bit of a different podcast than I've ever done because, when you think about breakthrough, we put this podcast together to talk about breakthrough moments and specifically those moments that happen right before the breakthrough. And on the podcast, I usually call it the 211 degree moment, which is right before water boils at 212 degrees. But something in the community happened several months ago, and it's been something that's really bothered me because it was something that I experienced as a kid growing up in San Antonio. My brothers were affiliated with a group of people that kind of took joy out of going out and what they would call rolling people, and they would be at parties and find a target. Maybe it was somebody that talked to somebody's girlfriend, or there was some underlying reason that they had beef with somebody that they would beat them up. And I remember my brother coming home with blood on his jeans and kind of telling me the story about, getting in a fight and knowing that was somebody else's blood and not knowing how they were left. It was an ongoing thing. And I've been going through, hearing about this case that's happened in Gilbert, Arizona recently really brought me back to that time, especially as a father, as somebody who's left that type of life behind. And it's been very impactful to see how the community outreach has been massive on this in a way that I wish was happening when I was a kid. And so I remember there was no news about it. It was just a way of life. And I remember living life at the time in a constant fear. Like if I was walking home from school, I was like, could this happen to me? Or, my mom always taught me to watch my back and listen for footsteps coming behind me. It was just a constant fear of, am I going to get in a fight? Am I going to get rolled, or what was going to happen to me? And I could only imagine, what being the victim of that felt like and all those things. And so in October of, this past year of 2023, there was a teenager that was beaten and left for dead and eventually died shortly thereafter. And there was an outcry for justice. And through that outcry for justice, a lot of things became uncovered. It was uncovered that there had been ongoing teen violence in a community that had been marketed as the safest community to move to. And in comes this voice that hit my feed, and it was you, Billie, who came in to give information that might not have been given in the way that I needed to get it. And you were in my TikTok feed, and you're a family law attorney, Billie Tarascio? Tarascio. Billie Tarascio, who's a family attorney with modern law, and you started posting about the information that you were getting, that you were hearing throughout the community, that you were validating. And I'm imagining there was some level of fact-checking you would have to go through to do all this. But then I started thinking about what I do for a living and how this has changed probably your life for the good and the bad of being the microphone on this. So I wanted to ask you to kick this off. First off, thank you for doing this. But secondly, what was the catalyst for you jumping into this conversation and leading it the way that you have?
Well, first, I want to say there are a lot of people talking about this, and everybody's got their own audience. So you might feel like I have an audience that is getting the majority of their information from me, but there are other podcasters, there are other members of the community, and I don't want to say for a minute that I'm taking credit to lead any movement, because I don't think I am.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But I have an audience that I am in a relationship with, that I've been in a relationship with for many years. And we talk about a lot. Because I'm a family law attorney, most of what we talk about is family law related, but it's not all family law related. Part of being a content creator is sharing what's going on with you. What's your life like? What are you doing? What are the lessons you're learning? Because you're truly in a relationship with your audience. And when I read the Arizona Republic article that was this huge expose about the Gilbert goons, it had a big impact on me as a human, as a mom, as somebody who lives in Gilbert. And I just wanted to talk to my audience about it. And that's how I got started.
That's how it inspired you. So let me take a moment now and let everyone know who you are and what you do. So you're the owner of Modern Law, and you're the co-owner of Win Without Law School. You're the host of the Modern Divorce podcast. You run a modern divorce support group on Facebook with how many members did you say?
We have over 16,000.
Over 16,000 members. That's a huge support group.
It's a big group.
And you're very well known in the industry as a speaker and the go-to person around family law, law firm marketing, and self-representation. And so what resonated with me, and so you say, you know, like, you don't feel like you're necessarily the leader on this, and there's a lot of people with a microphone that are talking about this. But the reason I say that you're a leader in it is because it takes leadership to put yourself out there and have an opinion on what's going on. Because there's so many people that have remained silent on this topic. And what you've been able to uncover and talk about has really been impactful to shedding light on something that has been really, what's the word I'm looking for, has been purposely, you know, hidden. And so you stepping into the limelight to do that, or not the limelight, but the light, you shedding light on this has been important. Let me ask you this. What has been the number one impact to your business because you started this movement of discussion around this?
The biggest impact to my business is that the people who are most invested in this conversation are local people.
Okay.
And I'm a local family law firm. So even if I'm talking to people, my local audience has expanded. So the algorithms are very, very smart, especially TikToks, but even the other algorithms. And they will put your content in front of people who want to hear about it. So I think my local audience is much bigger than it has been. I've never been recognized as much, even though I have had a large audience for a long time in family law. It's different now. It's more personal now. So it does help my law firm. My law firm is better known now, and we are getting, you know, plenty of people who are contacting me saying, "Hey, I need help with a divorce," even though I'm listening to talk about the Gilbert Goons.
Well, that's the interesting piece of this, is that there is all of this violence that's happening in the community, you know, is not your necessarily core business model, but there is a family law, you know, aspect to this of how families are managing, you know, how they manage their children, how this all kind of culminates. There's broken families, that sort of thing. And it's really interesting to me because I saw some of the families speak on this, of the kids that are being arrested. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing it and you're like, this is the problem. Like the root cause of a lot of this is that the parenting wasn't there, or whatever the case is. And so when I listen to you speak, I feel like you're talking to me. We were just talking about this a second ago, but I feel like you're talking to me personally as you're telling me and giving me information, telling me the story of what's going on. That to me is a gift that people who are marketing need to know. And how did you come to that understanding of, I'm going to pick up my phone and use the camera on it and start creating content to talk to my audience so that I can get a message out and get free information out to them? When did that start happening?
I've been making content for a long time. I started using TikTok, I think, in 2021, and TikTok is different. It's just a different platform than the other platforms, and the other platforms are catching up, but it was, to me, the platform that I had the most success in, the platform that I'm most comfortable with, the platform where I really felt like, wow, these are my people. Like, we're in a conversation.
Absolutely.
They're so engaged. So, and the only way that you can make enough content to really be successful, I think, as a content creator or as a business owner, is to make a lot of it. And that means you have to show up authentic. Mm-hmm. You can't really script this stuff out. You can't spend a whole lot of time editing. It needs to be real.
And that's helped you. It's helped you grow an audience.
Definitely.
So let's jump into, you start posting about, you know, the Preston Lord case, and immediately you probably start to see traction on this, because I remember looking it up and nobody was really talking about it as much as you were. And, you know, you think of TikTok as this, it's a worldwide, you know, database of information, yet you went hyper local on a topic that gained all kinds of traction. So the people that are following you, how did it change? Did you start to find you were growing your audience from this?
Yes, definitely. So one of the first videos I did, the first video I did on the topic, It wasn't great. It wasn't a great video, you know, in terms of videos, but it got, I think, 500,000 views, and my videos usually get 10 to 40,000. So 500,000 was a lot, and followers shot really.
Followers skyrocketed.
It did by about probably 25,000 new followers
on one video.
No, not one video. Probably over the next month or so.
Okay. And then so you start to see that this is going somewhere, right? So I would imagine that from a psychological perspective, you start to get more invested in the story. I mean, for all the right reasons. I mean, this is a story that needed to be told. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's jump into the Preston Lord case. And by the way, you know, it's a terrible tragedy that happened, and it's something that I hope never happens again. And I want you to know that I think if change comes, and I think change is coming, but as change comes, it's because somebody had the what's the word? The courage to speak up and not be afraid. And there's nothing about you that tells me you would ever be afraid of a challenge, but let's talk about the case. So when you first heard about it, what made you want to talk about it? Like, was it because it had been, there was rumors that this had been an ongoing situation in Gilbert with teen violence and it wasn't being reported? Or was it just the case itself that there was a kid who had been beaten and eventually passed and no one was being held accountable for it, or a combination?
It was the whole story. So when the story broke in December, I had seen, you know, the hashtag Justice for Preston Lord. I had heard that there was a kid that was beaten at a Halloween party. I didn't look into it. I assumed it was, you know, these things happen. But when the story came out that this was a culmination of a pattern that had gone on for so long, that was unchecked in this town that we live in, that we believe is so safe. It's like this little magical place we live in. It really is. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. I don't know if you know this, it's also kindness. Like if someone writes a letter and they write kindness, Arizona, it comes to Gilbert.
Does it really?
Yes.
I didn't know this.
Like we have this belief in our community. And so to hear these things was crazy. And my kids, I have 2 teen boys who are a senior and a junior in high school. So this could be them. And then the places this is happening, In-N-Out Burger and downtown Gilbert parking garage, like these are all places that
right here
I'm at all
right
the
across
time.
The street, right across the street
these
from us.
These are not bad areas.
Yes.
So it was just such an incredible story that I just felt like we needed to talk about it.
And so when you did, what did you uncover that surprised you in this story?
Well, there was a movement already going way before I said anything. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to take away from that movement.
Understood.
You know, there are people who are getting up at council meetings and they're going to school district meetings and they're going to all of the local councils and they're speaking to the city council. And I'm not doing that because I already have an audience. I already have a platform. And I don't want to take away from those people who are coming to these events using this 3-minute time to say what they need to say, because there's a lot of really important voices happening right now. And the only reason that change is going to happen is because of collective voices standing up. And I've talked with these people, these men and women who are changing their lives, who are using this as a wake-up call to say, I'm going to be a better parent. I'm going to spend more time with my kids. I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to show up. I'm going to learn about these local elections. And that's pretty cool.
So watching that happen in the community that you live in, you decided, okay, I'm going to keep the message going. But as you started hearing the message, what surprised you in terms of, you know, there's a lot of talk about there's hidden agendas behind why it was covered up and those sort of things. But from your perspective, what was the most surprising thing that you found out about?
The thing that's, I think, really heavy is how complicated it is.
Okay, yes.
How many different jurisdictions, how many different organizations, how it's an election year. That sucks. There's political agendas happening everywhere with everything. Nothing is happening in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. There's no one organization that's at fault. It's impossible to pinpoint how this happened or why this happened. It's a convergence of so many factors.
Well, I think you're being super nice about that process, right? But I appreciate it because, one can say there was a conspiracy to cover up, and one can say it's extremely complicated, and I can appreciate both sides of it. One thing I did realize is, when you look at what's happening and why it's taken so long, is that there's an enormous amount of evidence around this, and for people who don't know. A lot of this happened from, or a lot of the reason why they're able to hold people accountable. It started with an outcry from the community. Am I right with that?
Absolutely.
It started with the community saying this is not okay.
Right.
It got really loud, and then Arizona Republic did a really good expose on this. You
Gilbert
started talking, other people started talking in the community. A podcast came out about it, and then ultimately people started, doing the work behind it. Now it's like there's been an accumulation of evidence that I want to say the last I heard, Queen Creek, was doing their due diligence around going through, I want to say like 40, I don't know, so 40,000 or some massive amount of video that they found around not just this case, but all the others that were taking place. So how do you feel about the process since it's been like, now that they're starting to hold people accountable? How do you feel that process is going from your perspective?
I mean, it's certainly frustrating. It's frustrating to watch Gilbert PD reopen cases that never should have been closed.
Okay.
But it's also frustrating to watch Gilbert PD open cases that never should have been closed, make referrals to Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and have Maricopa County Attorney's Office say, no, we're not going to prosecute these. So that's why I say there's plenty of blame to spread around here. Gilbert really needed to do a better job. The information that's come out in terms of the amount of fights that were happening at In-N-Out, the amount of calls that were happening, the parents that reached out to Gilbert with evidence and with crimes, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of parents who said, I sent this evidence. I reported this crime. Nothing happened. That's real. And now they're reopening them, and now there's new crimes being reported. And I think there's been 43 arrests.
43 arrests that happened from this.
Since January.
Right? So think about that. I mean, that's like the public outcry. It's a cause and effect. I mean, the public did this, and people like you really speaking up. And I know you don't want to take credit for that. I know you don't and I understand that. I wouldn't either. But the reason that I want to point it out is because I think that there are a lot of people silent on the subject that might even had evidence. It's an interesting thing, but a friend of mine who, it's like I ended up having a friend that I worked with many years ago, who's kind of remained in the background as a colleague, like on LinkedIn or something, right? And so her name was mentioned in the paper because her daughter knew and had a lot of the evidence that ended up being used, and she was like, I'm going to tell the story, and I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to use my name, and and I think that takes a lot of courage to be able to step up and say something. What's the backlash for you that you've seen? So I would imagine that now you have more followers, that more following, that increased following does translate to more business. But then there's a dark side of that. Like, what kind of hate are you receiving, and what's the backlash? Like, talk to me about it.
Plenty. Plenty of people have all sorts of opinions about what should and shouldn't be said and by who. And, I am just not built to be a pleaser. I'm just not. I'm not. And there's so many people who are getting value out of what I'm sharing. And it's real to me. And it's important enough to do, even if some people don't like it.
Well, yeah. I mean, nobody's going to like it, right? I mean, no one likes hearing that there is hidden agendas and there's political agendas that are, nobody wants this kind of place to have a black eye.
No.
But it has a black eye.
It does. And it is what it is. Pretending it doesn't exist doesn't solve problems. And I think that we can get back to the place that 95% of Gilbert is. I really do. But not unless we call it what it is, and invest in our community, invest in making sure that our police department has what it needs to actually investigate crimes, and schools have what they need to deal with what's happening for students, because students are in bad shape. They're in bad shape. So
why do you say that? Why do you say that the students are in bad shape? I mean, and I there's obvious reasons why, but I'm curious from your perspective, especially because you have teens.
Yeah. I mean, I think our teens are not doing well. Generationally, right now, I don't think they're doing well. And yesterday there were conversations that circulated that happened at Perry High School.
I saw the entire. I was walking with my wife last night, and one of her friends sent her the entire text chain. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it just highlights how badly our children are struggling.
Did you read the text?
I did.
And the kid text. Was just he was spiraling.
He was spiraling. He was crying out for help, and at the same time, he was making very explicit threats to do mass carnage and shoot up an entire school. So
in the worst fashion, the worst massacre of all time, he said.
It's just terrible.
Yeah.
And the police apparently have investigated and determined it wasn't a threat, but this is what our children are feeling and seeing. So think about all the kids at that high school who saw this exchange. Think about the kid who's responding to the kid in crisis, and the kid who's responding to the kid in crisis is trying to figure out how do I respond? How do I respond to somebody who's telling me that they're going to shoot up a school? This is my friend. How do I let my friend know I'm there for him, but he's out of control? The things that our kids are being exposed to are really awful. They know that they have reported crimes and nothing's happened. They've watched people get beaten up for a year. They've watched these videos be circulated without any consequences. When you talked about what it felt like to be a kid needing to look over your shoulder, that's what our kids are dealing with. Mm-hmm. And this is after they're coming out of a pandemic and isolation and more depression and all of the things that our children are dealing with.
So to give the listeners context, there was a text message that went out between, I think it was two kids, and one of them was saying I'm going to do this, there's going to be a big event that's going to take place because, no one's really heard my voice basically. And that this is going to be the worst, carnage ever, and this is going to be a massacre, beyond belief, right? And then this gets sent around enough that it was on my wife's phone,
right?
And we don't have kids that go to Perry today, and so the fact that it went around that far, and to think of all the parents that have now to worry about sending their kid to school, and I think it just happened yesterday, right? You said it was just yesterday. I found out about it last night, and my wife was saying, yeah, she doesn't want to send her kid to school. And I said, well, we would definitely not send our kids to school, right, if that was happening. And so you're right. There is a big difference in the way that we grew up to today and I think social media plays a lot into it. But yes, isolation, all those things come into play. So from the perspective of, has any of the families, and I don't know if you could talk about this, but has any of the families come after you for reporting on it?
Not directly.
Not directly. Okay. I think you mentioned on one of yours that somebody had filed something to the board or something, but.
Oh yeah. I got these bar complaints, but the bar was like, this is not a real complaint.
Yeah.
I got a cease and desist.
Oh, you got a cease and desist.
Yeah, that was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing about you that says to me you're going to be bullied in this way, right? And so I would imagine there's a certain level of bullying that you have to ignore that happens on TikTok as well.
Yeah, that's part of the deal. If you're going to engage with an audience in this way, people are not going to like you. Not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay.
Yeah. And so what advice do you give to people people who have not engaged and used this like this? Has this truly been... Let me ask it a different way. If you look at your revenue streams, mm-hmm. I would imagine that you can identify that this certain amount of business is coming from your social media groups, social media TikToks. Do you look at your business and say, I know that I'm driving business from these areas? And how much of that is impactful to your business?
Yeah, I love talking about this topic.
Okay.
So at the end of, I think, 2021, I was looking at all my numbers, and I was doing the very regular thing of paying marketing agencies and SEO companies. And the numbers told me a story that said, this is not worth it. I can generate a whole lot more leads differently. And at that point, we decided no more paid advertising whatsoever. We're going to invest 100% in creating community and value, and everything supports itself. So we have pro bono day events that we talk about on social media. We create support groups. Everything is surrounding value. We have a podcast where we bring on referral partners. We create blogs from that. We want to create so much value and goodwill and community and support our people that is all of it.
How much time are you spending? And I know I want to get you a chance to answer this question, but and maybe we pin this one in too, but how much time do you have to spend in that process, you yourself, in development of content? Is it 30% of your day? Is it, of your week? What is it? What are you looking at?
Yeah, it's a lot. I spend a lot of time. This is one of my biggest jobs within the firm. It's managing, it's direction, it's strategy, and it's marketing and communication with our audience. So I would say at least 40% of my time is spent on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Are you actually doing the writing of the content yourself? No. I mean, do you, like when you say you turn it into blogs, do you have a team of people that help with that? And
yes, but we also I use transcripts from podcasts or lunch and learns or meetings or videos that I do to put into ChatGPT to create content from my own words.
That's it. Yeah. So that's what we do.
We should all be using AI for this.
We absolutely do that. I mean, I'm trying to figure out a better process on leveraging everything we do, but this podcast, what he'll do is he'll take it. Fabio, who's in the background here, who's our producer, he will take all of it, drop it into an AI. It'll go through, he said, she said, right, in a podcast. Then we take that and do a blog on it so that people can read it. But it's leveraging those little things to take one piece of content. We'll chop this into 10, small pieces, and then leverage all that for blogs, and and that's better SEO than what an SEO company will give you.
Definitely.
And so then we'll talk about the revenue streams that it's created for you.
So for us, it's everything. Like, we just don't spend any other money or time on any other type of advertising. It's
all content created.
All content creation. It's also email marketing. Yeah. It's events. If it doesn't add value to our audience or our community, we're really not interested in spending any time or money on it.
Interesting. So I'm just curious of the money aspect of it, but have you ever thought about just doing marketing for law firms?
Yeah, I'd love that job.
I mean, it sounds really fun. I mean, because you're so good at it. And but I also think that there's a gift to it. I think that people who are in the space of content creation and strike gold with it is because there's a very good, there's something about the way that they can communicate that touches an audience. And I was mentioning this, like, I feel like you talk to me. I feel like we're friends. I feel like we're sitting in front of each other. We just met. And yet I feel like because I've seen so much of your content, I have an idea of your personality. I know a little bit of your jokes. I know how your sense of humor comes in. And so I'm like, yeah, she's really cool. I would hang out with her, So from that, you have leveraged marketing in a way that most law firms don't. Most people do billboards and cheesy commercials, and you don't have to spend that amount of budget. Or has the budget grown? Like, what is it, a fraction of what somebody else would pay in traditional marketing, what you would pay today, or is it about the same?
So we probably spend about the same, but ours is on humans.
Talk about that. What does that mean?
Well, it takes humans to create podcasts and, to edit content and to have the email lists and to do the events and to have an intake team that can field all the calls. So we do spend money on that. It's just not in pay-per-click or outsourced agencies or anything like that. It's all internal because nobody knows our brand or our audience or what we're about or who we're trying to reach better than the people in my office.
That's perfect. And your audience, obviously, right? Like, your audience is who wants to be served. So starting a Facebook group that grew to 16,000 people and it's a support group, which is, which is really cool, because you're not only attracting the people who might be going through a divorce, they've gone through a divorce, and they're able to join a place where they can get educated on the process. And so when did that idea click for you?
I think that was another person in my office who said, I think we should have a Facebook group. And I said, great, let's do it.
So you're the executor. He
was a marketing person.
Got it. Okay.
He was our social media. He was supporting this effort. And he said, I think we should have a Facebook group. And I'm like, no problem. And so he set it up, and then it took off. And so one of the also things that I've learned is, like, I don't really have to plan content, because my audience tells me on a daily basis what they want to talk about it.
What's that process look like?
Well, one of the reasons I kept talking about Gilbert Goons is because there were so many comments on the videos with questions. So then you just answer the questions.
Answer the questions.
You just
That's
follow,
your content. Yeah.
You just follow what people want to talk about. So when I'm trying to figure out what questions to talk about for TikTok or other things, I'll go to the support group and I'll find out, what are people talking about most? Which posts have the most comments? This is what people want to talk about. This is what I'm going to talk about. So you really got to let ego go and just ride the wave.
Ride the wave. Yeah. And it becomes easier because you know what you're good at. And so when you see a question, you're like, that's an easy question, then talk about it, right? Use that. And the reason I ask you the questions is because a lot of my audience is in the real estate and mortgage area, or lending area of the industry. And I have been preaching for probably the last 5 to 7 years that content is where it's at. And everyone overthinks it. And so when somebody says, I just don't know what to say, then I'll say, well, write down every question you had from your clients this week and do content like that. But when you think about building support groups, a mortgage, I'm sure you've had one. Mm-hmm. The process was somewhat complicated, or questions that you had that, I don't know what this means. I don't know what that means. And if you just created a group that answers those very easy questions that people don't understand, like what are points to a rate? Like, not the general public doesn't understand that, but you being able, or the person delivering the message could answer those easy questions. And that's what you've done. You've said, I'm going to answer the questions that people want to know, that I have the answers to. So where do you feel when you start to go into uncharted water, like speaking on a case? Was that the first time you ever took a case that was so public and started to have an opinion on it? Or is this, you've done that in other cases?
I've done that in other cases. I talked about the Ruby Frankie case. Talked about the Gabby Petito case. So whenever there are
big cases
that touch family law that people want to talk about, we'll talk about it.
What do you think about that? She just got, I don't know what happened. I don't know can you give me a quick rundown of the Ruby Frank case? Because I know she just got sentenced, 60 years or something? Up
to 60 years.
Yeah. So what was the nutshell on that case?
Well, so Ruby Frankie was this Mormon vlogger in the early days of vlogging, and she had this channel called 8 Passengers, and she has 6 kids, and she was giving parenting advice.
Okay.
And she was arrested for horrific child abuse.
Just a complete opposite of the audience you're building. Yeah.
Right. Just the irony.
Irony, that's the word I wanted to say. Yeah, the juxtaposition is what I wanted to say, yes.
Right. So that's why I started talking about that. And those case details are absolutely horrific. And yes, she and her business partner, who tortured their 2 youngest children, are going to jail for anywhere between 40 and 60 years.
Wow. And where was this at? Utah, right? And well, obviously, I mean, it could be Gilbert or Utah with the amount of LDS that's in the communities. But I thought I read somewhere that there was some connection to Arizona. And so has anyone from the Preston Lord family ever reached out to you, or has anybody thanked you for what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So I've had interactions on social media with some of their family. They tend to lay low, and they also, I don't know that they entirely appreciate, they may not entirely appreciate just how forward I am, because they are very well behaved, more well behaved than I am. I don't mind going into controversy. I don't mind calling out potential problems. I almost feel like compelled to do so. And so I'm not looking, I don't want to ever, we're not aligned. You know, they have their camp and their people, and they shouldn't ever be, no one should ever think that what I'm saying reflects what they think.
Okay.
These are only my opinions.
Those are your opinions, but I think you come with a level of authority on the matter because of what you do and who you are in the community, and I think people trust that. I think people know that you're not just somebody with an opinion. You're in the community. You have a voice on other cases. You're a successful attorney, you know. So I think people look at that, and there is a little bit of authority that comes with that. But I think your attitude behind, I'm not going to back down from some controversy. What would you like to see happen overall? Like what is the, you know, there's a insane sacrifice that had to happen to get us to a point. But what do you think comes out of all this? And what would you like to see happen?
I'm most disappointed in Gilbert's leadership and the lack of leadership coming out of the school districts. I'm most disappointed that the leaders haven't said, wow, we clearly really missed something. Let's see what we can do to figure it out.
Well, so let's talk about that for a second. So you, I don't know if I'm 30,000 feet from the story, you're you're much closer to it, and you're getting information poured into you that you have to sift through. I would imagine that people are like, oh, here's some more information, and here's some more. Everybody has a thought, but I see it like this, and I could be wrong. Very limited information. That all of these are connected, where you have school officials and you have not government, but local officials, as well as the mayors and all this, you know, the police chief. All of those are interconnected. And I feel like a decision was made to bury it until it got loud. And do you feel the same way? Do you feel like there's like this underlying communication that was like, we're burying this. This is too loud. And why? But what would be the purpose of it? To keep the image of safety and kindness in the forefront, or because it could impact the families that were involved?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
You know, Preston Lord's murder happened in Queen Creek, but most of the kids and most of the violence happened in Gilbert. Gilbert didn't know, really and truly, they did not know that there was a group of teens that were loosely affiliated on an ongoing basis committing these assaults. They knew there were teen assaults, but they didn't know who. They didn't know it was regular. They didn't know it was the same people. And so they really got caught on their heels. Mm-hmm. And when they got questioned on it, their go-to was, well, we don't want to jeopardize the Preston Lord investigation, which is just absolute bullshit, because the Preston Lord investigation was in Queen Creek and had nothing to do with the crimes that we were asking them about in Gilbert. So they were ill-equipped to deal with the onslaught. Whatever PR advice they got was terrible. And to this day, nobody said, wow, we should do better. Nobody said that. Nobody's
come out and said we should do better around
right.
this? Yeah. Because I think that's where leadership comes in.
Right.
If the police chief got on a press conference and said, we need to do better.
We screwed up.
And somebody is saying, if you say that, you're going to get sued. And that's bad advice.
Well, it's wrong.
Yeah.
The police can't get sued for doing a bad job. They just can't. They can only be sued for violating your civil rights. So they cannot be sued by saying, we dropped the ball on this one. We need to change our protocols. We need to figure out what went wrong and come up with new policies. That's an easy win, but nobody said it.
What has been most rewarding for you speaking out on this?
I don't know that it is rewarding. Honestly, it's very heavy.
It is very heavy.
It's very, very heavy. And there are days when I feel like it's too much, but you can't stop looking. You can't pretend these problems aren't here.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, because I know you're gonna, I feel like I know the answer to this, but I want to ask it. Do you think that your voice on the matter will bring change?
No.
I think it will. I think it will.
I think our collective voices will bring change.
So this is a really good, you're giving me advice. I'm the community. And it's a weird thing to be in a community. I live in Chandler, Arizona. My office is in Gilbert. It's always been in Gilbert. I've been in the community since '05. Even when I think about local news, I've never attached myself to the local news. Like I'm a transplant, here. But now I'm here because my kids go to school here. They go to school in a Gilbert Christian school. And so what should the community be doing right now to be involved? Like, what advice would you give me as a citizen to say, you need to do something, or, get involved here, or, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is so hard. I will tell you, I'm incredibly grateful that my children go to a small charter school where this does not happen, and where it's small enough so that I've never felt like the administration is too far away or won't listen or doesn't want to hear our opinions. That's been very, very good, and I've never been more grateful that I have luckily ended up in that position with my kids. And I think if your kids are in one of these very big high schools where this stuff is happening, you have to take a really hard look at that and is this worth it?
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of great things that happen with big schools, big public schools. They have resources, they have activities, they have really cool things that you can take advantage of. But is it worth my kids being exposed to what they're being exposed to? Because Arizona has greater options for school choice than any other place in the country. And so parents should be looking at that.
Yeah, we have an older daughter who went to Perry, and she told she had a tragedy that happened with her boyfriend. Right after high school, he had passed. She found out, or she went to go get him. He wasn't answering the phone, and he had an accidental overdose, but she found him, and that's been very traumatic on her. And then we have this gap, and then we have our younger kids, 13 and 11, and my wife, or she came to my wife and I and said, whatever you do, they cannot go to the schools that I went to. Perry was the worst. And not to bash Perry, because I think there's good administration. I think there's good people wherever they're, but what she said was the amount of drugs that were going on there, the amount of prescription drugs, it's a whole different ballgame from when I was in school. Right. But then the social media, the bullying, and everything that was happening, she was like, just whatever you do, don't send the kids to this middle school that she had gone to and to this high school. And my wife was like, I'm not doing it. And she got them and put them in a different school. And my kids were super upset about it because they had their friends and they had this. But hearing the way that the school has managed, anytime there's any sort of problem, I feel very good about where they're at. But I do think, to your point, if you can get them out of big schools that, the administration doesn't have their hands on what's going on at the student level, could be a really big factor.
They're out of control. And I believe in teachers. I do. I think teachers are amazing and wonderful, but it's out of control. Nobody can get it under control. So what are you going to do? Are you going to sacrifice your kid in that environment? Because that's kind of what's happening.
And Arizona is an interesting state when it comes to charter schools. And, I think we have more charter schools per capita than any other place, or something like that.
Right. And with the ESA dollars, you can send your kids to private schools and have the state pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually take advantage of that as well. So my wife is very nifty on that stuff. And so from your perspective, or not from your perspective, but how do people find you? Let's start there. Like, if somebody wanted your advice on family law, divorce, anything with relation to family law, how do they find you?
Really easy to find. You can join the Modern Divorce Support Group. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on TikTok or Instagram. Anywhere you're online, we're online. Or you can call us at the office.
Awesome. And so your handle on TikTok, which is probably where you have your most following, how many followers do you have now?
Oh, well, the most are on Facebook, interestingly.
Oh, really? Okay.
Our Facebook page has like 480,000.
480,000.
Yeah.
And then in TikTok?
TikTok's like 125,000.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay. And it's
Modern Law AZ.
Modern Laws AZ. Is that your specific handle? Like that you answer the questions when
Yes.
people, yeah. So you're really cool because I just reached out to you one Saturday and I'm like, I'm going to ask her if she'll be on the podcast because what you've created from a personal branding perspective is something that I think people need to look at that model and follow for whatever industry they're in, because you don't see people doing it the way that you're doing it. And I want to tell you that I really, would love to figure out ways that we can collaborate. We do a lot of events. I have an event coming up also that it would be really cool to get you speaking at, to tell, your story, but because I think whatever you're doing translates to our industry. So it'd be really cool to partner on those things. But thank you for making a drive to our studio. We're in Gilbert, Arizona. You're in Gilbert, Arizona. But you have made an impact on me, and I thank you for that. Anybody I've asked if they know you, they all know you. The community appreciates what you're doing. And I know that you're not doing it for those type of accolades, but I think somebody has to stand up and provide information, and you have a good platform to do that. So I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you coming here and telling your story. It means a lot to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.